Okay, welcome back. This is going to be part three where I talk about me being in the employment sector and then basically up until now. Um, so I went back home after I graduated at the end of my lease in in New York. I was in graduate housing, but there was a lease. I should also do a video about housing, like undergraduate housing and then graduate housing, because my experience has been different each time. Um, so yeah, I went back home. I was there for a few months. I left actually on my birthday. Um, the following year, because I'm a Capricorn and my birthday is at the beginning of the year. Um, so um, I came back to New York, but I had been applying for jobs and I kept getting they're like, oh, your qualifications, but your experience. So it's the thing where you go to school because they say, oh, if you get an education, then blah, blah, blah. And then you may think that, like, oh, if I go to school and I complete this program and do this and do that, then bam, once I graduate, you know, I'll have a job in this sector or that field. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately, because for one reason or another, employers, when they're seeking employees, it may be an entry level position, but with that entry level position, they want 3 to 5 years experience. 3 to 5 years experience that you lack because you were in school. And some people may finish their program early. Some people may complete it in 4 years, undergraduate, or if they do an associate's degree, or they do like they get a licenses degree, um, like they get a cosmetology license, or they become an electrician, so a trade school, or they obtain a certificate in something. So the different programs take um, different amounts of time, and in trade schools you'll get the hands-on experience for the most part. I believe I've never been to a trade school or in a program to learn a certain trade, so I can't say like, oh, blah blah blah. But yeah, you'll get the hands-on experience. But during undergraduate, like, you made some people work at, they find a job within the school. So during undergraduate, I was a student worker, and you get paid minimum wage of your state, and you only work a set amount of hours. And it was a part of federal work study, like that's the income. Some people may have worked outside of the school or had regular day jobs because maybe they didn't live on campus, or they had to work to fund their education, or they were a parent or parents. So everybody's experience was different, but for the most part, generally speaking, when people graduate college, they don't have 3 to 5 years of experience in a certain sector. Some people may work during high school, others don't. And even if they do, they may have a certain amount of retail and customer service experience. Um, and you can, I believe you can use those skills. Those skills transfer over into certain areas, because you do need to know how to interact with others, how to speak to people. Um, but it's certain skills that you don't learn, or that you don't obtain in college, to apply for a job right after, because they want 3 to 5 years of professional work experience for entry level positions. Sometimes this is not just me being excessive. Sometimes it's like that. It's like entry level, but they require 35 years of experience that you don't have. Or say you're like me, you go to school straight through, right? So you're your traditional student, meaning that you went from high school straight to college, and then from college you attended a graduate program, maybe. So once you're done, you start applying to jobs because maybe you want to take a break. Maybe this is it for you. You wanted to obtain a master's and you got it, so now you want to work in your particular field, whatever that may be. So you apply to a job, and on paper, in terms of qualifications, you have what they're looking for. The education matches, but your experience doesn't match. So you apply to a job and you have people saying, "Oh, your qualifications are amazing, blah, blah, blah." Educational qualifications, but your work experience, it lacks. So we're not going to be able to proceed with your application. And it was a lot of that, and I was getting tired of that. Like, there's this one thing where apparently somebody said, like, "Oh, she thought she was gonna come out of my school." I mentioned before that it was a private school. It is a private school, but it's also like a fancy, smancy, pantsy type of school. Ain't gonna say the name. If you know me, then you know what school. But that school, and before that, somebody else had told me, like, "Oh, having a degree from this school means something." And I was like, "Oh yeah, so what will it mean for me?" I just wanted a job, to be honest, because you have a certain grace period for student loans, and then after that grace period ends, your loans, they go into repayment. So if you're working, you need to notify your loan service provider. If you're not working, you need to speak with your loan service provider and say, "Hey, I've been seeking employment. I've been applying. Maybe you went on some interviews, but I haven't found a job as of yet. I'm still looking." But you talk to them about deferment or forbearance, and depending on your type of loan, for the most part, because in graduate school, your loans, they're unsubsidized, so that interest is whatever. So your loans, like, you won't have to pay the amount, but the interest will continue, and it may have started while you were in your graduate program anyway. So that's what happened to me. I graduated in May. I didn't start my first professional job until March of the next year. And I interviewed for this position in January, the year after I graduated. So it was a few weeks after my birthday. I interviewed for the position, but it took them from then until March to like check my references and my education and this and that, and then voila. But that's a long time, and loans may not be your only bill. Some people have student credit cards, or you might have a phone bill that you have to deal with. So you got, like, some people may say apply to a retail job. Like, you can apply, but just because you apply doesn't mean that you're going to get that job. They look for certain qualities, characteristics, certain experience, and if you lack that, then that's that. And then you can apply for a job that seeks a higher education degree, so above your high school diploma or your high school equivalency degree, or your GED, graduate equivalency diploma. I think that's what it stands for anyway, but it's HSE now. But they want something more. They might not want a certificate in something or a training, or they may want that, but they want some above your high school degree, or your high school diploma. So you get a college degree, and then in your sector you need to apply for, you need a master's to, make something shake. So you get your master's, and then you have that master's, you have the education, but you don't have the experience in that particular field. So I dealt with like, oh, education, but the experience, I didn't have the experience. So, oh, this is good, like your qualifications, blah, blah, blah. In terms of education, but the experience, most of my jobs were in college. Like that's when I started working in college. I was told I didn't have to work in high school, so I didn't work in high school. So yeah, you got fat, and I don't know. I was applying for jobs in Chicago, and it wasn't moving. It wasn't, the results weren't. I wasn't getting no results. But when I was applying to jobs in New York, it was like, And I wanted to be in New York anyway, because when I was there during school, it was like, oh, you're here for school. So the experience I was seeking, because I always wanted to live in New York since I was little, I didn't feel as though I got that. So I wanted to be in New York. And actually, before I graduated, like in April of that year, and before I went back home. I applied for some jobs through like the city government website, and this place contacted me, and it would have been so good because I would have been an investigator for this particular organization if I would have moved forward through the process. But my phone was janky, so when they called, I never received the call, and then I was doing something on my phone. I got the voicemail like 2 days later. And at that time, I was like in contact with career services at my school. So I told her, and she was like, oh, blah, 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 you can still reach out to them. So I contacted the lady. They didn't call me back. And so I waited and I called again. I never received a response back from them. But they call you and they leave a voicemail message asking you to return the call if you're still interested. And when you return the call, when you get it, they don't respond. So that happened. That was a bit annoying. But in Chicago, no. I wasn't. It was like, oh, the qualifications thing. Your qualifications in terms of education. Like you got a master's degree, but you don't have the experience. So what are we gonna do with you? That's what it felt like. And I was getting tired of that. And then somebody said like, oh, she thought that, or so I was told, she thought that she was supposed to get 88K after graduating from this school. Well, that would have been nice. I wasn't even asking for 88K. I just wanted a job, as I mentioned earlier, because just because you don't work, your bills don't stop. If you don't work, you like, what bills? I had credit card bills. I had a phone bill. I had student credit cards. That doesn't stop because you're not employed. So I contacted the loan service provider and I dealt with the loan situation to have them on hold until I found a job. But when I would apply for jobs in New York, they would contact me. It was more responsive than Chicago. I wasn't getting that, oh, blah, blah, blah. And if it was that way, it wasn't. New York was just more responsive. And then me wanting to be in New York, they just added to it. So I wanted to be back here. So I was like, I'm going back to New York. I'm applying for jobs here. It's not working out. But when I apply for jobs in New York, they like, oh, blah, blah, blah. They want to interview me, but I'm not there, so how can I do an interview? Skype would have been sufficient. But at that time, it was like, whatever. Didn't know that. This is getting winded, so I'm going to stop here and pick back up again.